Chapter 19. A Great Lady. The visit that we received on the following morning was, to my mind, one of the most surprising things about the whole affair. I was in my room when Poirot slipped in with his eyes shining. "Mon ami, we have a visitor." "Who is it?" "The Dowager Duchess of Merton." "How extraordinary! What does she want?" "If you accompany me downstairs, mon ami, you will know." I hastened to comply. We entered the room together. The Duchess was a small woman with a high bridged nose and autocratic eyes. Although she was short, one would not have dared to call her dumpy. Dressed though she was in unfashionable black, she was yet every inch a grande dame. She was also impressing me as having an almost ruthless personality. Where her son was negative, she was positive. Her willpower was terrific. I could almost feel waves of force emanating from her. No wonder this woman had always dominated all those with whom she came in contact. She put up a lorgnette and studied first me and then my companion. Then she spoke to him. Her voice was clear and compelling, a voice accustomed to command and to be obeyed. "You are Monsieur Hercule Poirot?" My friend bowed. "At your service, Madame la Duchesse." She looked at me. "This is my friend Captain Hastings. He assists me in my cases." Her eyes looked momentarily doubtful. Then she bent her head in acquiescence. She took the chair that Poirot offered. "I have come to consult you on a very delicate matter, Monsieur Poirot, and I must ask that what I tell you shall be understood to be entirely confidential." "That without saying, madame." "It was Lady Yardley who told me about you. From the way in which she spoke of you and the gratitude she expressed, I felt that you were the only person likely to help me." "Rest assured, I will do my best, madame." Still she hesitated. Then, at last, with an effort, she came to the point, came to it with a simplicity that reminded me in an odd way of Jane Wilkinson on that memorable night at the Savoy. "Monsieur Poirot, I want to ensure that my son does not marry the actress Jane Wilkinson." If Poirot felt astonishment, he refrained from showing it. He regarded her thoughtfully and took his time about replying. "Can you be a little more definite, madame, as to what you want me to do?" "That is not easy. I feel that such a marriage would be a great disaster. It would ruin my son's life." "Do you think so, madame?" "I'm sure of it. My son has very high ideals. He knows really very little of the world. He has never cared for the young girls of his own class. They have struck him as empty-headed and frivolous. But as regards this woman, well, she is very beautiful, I admit that, and she has the power of enslaving men. She has bewitched my son. I have had hopes that the infatuation would run its course. Mercifully, she was not free. But now that her husband is dead—" She broke off. "They intend to be married in a few months' time. The whole happiness of my son's life is at stake." She spoke more peremptorily. "It must be stopped, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot shrugged his shoulders. "I do not say that you are not right, madame. I agree that the marriage is not a suitable one. But what can one do?" "It is for you to do something." Poirot slowly shook his head. "Yes, yes, you must help me." "I doubt if anything would avail, madame. Your son, I should say, would refuse to listen to anything against the lady, and also I do not think there is very much against her to say. I doubt if there are any discreditable incidents to be raked up in her past. She has been, shall we say, careful." "I know," said the Duchess grimly. "Ah, so you have already made the inquiries in that direction." She flushed a little under his keen glance. "There is nothing I would not do, Monsieur Poirot, to save my son from the marriage," she reiterated with this word emphatically. "Nothing." She paused, then went on. "Money is nothing in this matter. Name any fee you like. But the marriage must be stopped, and you are the man to do it." Poirot slowly shook his head. "It is not a question of money. I can do nothing, for a reason which I will explain to you presently. But also I may say I do not see there is anything to be done. I cannot give you help, Madame la Duchesse. Will you think me impertinent if I give you advice? What advice? Do not antagonize your son. He is of an age to choose for himself. Because his choice is not your choice, do not assume that you must be right. If it is a misfortune, then accept misfortune. Be at hand to aid him when he needs aid, but do not turn him against you. You hardly understand. She rose to her feet. Her lips were trembling. But yes, Madame la Duchesse, I understand very well. I comprehend the mother's heart. No one comprehends it better than I, Hercule Poirot, and I say to you with authority, be patient. Be patient and calm, and disguise your feelings. There is yet a chance that the matter may break itself. Opposition will merely increase your son's obstinacy. Goodbye, Monsieur Poirot, she said coldly. I am disappointed. I regret infinitely, madame, that I cannot be of service to you. I am in a difficult position. Lady Edgware, you see, has already done me the honor to consult me herself. Oh, I see. Her voice cut like a knife. You are in the opposite camp. That explains, no doubt, why Lady Edgware has not yet been arrested for her husband's murder. Come, Madame la Duchesse? I think you heard what I said. Why is she not arrested? She was there that evening. She was seen to enter the house, to enter his study. No one else went near him, and he was found dead. And yet she is not arrested. Our police force must be corrupt through and through. With shaking hands, she arranged the scarf around her neck. Then, with the slightest of bows, she swept out of the room. Whew, what a Tartar! I admire her, though, don't you? I said. Because she wishes to arrange the universe to her manner of thinking? Well, she's only got her son's welfare at heart. Poirot nodded his head. That is true enough. And yet, Hastings, will it really be such a bad thing for Monsieur le Duc to marry Jane Wilkinson? Why, you don't think she's really in love with him? Probably not. Almost certainly not. But she is very much in love with his position. She will play her part carefully. She is an extremely beautiful woman, and very ambitious. It is not such a catastrophe. The Duke might very easily have married a young girl of his own class, who would have accepted him for the same reasons. But no one would have made the song or the dance about that. That is quite true, and suppose he marries a girl who loves him passionately? Is there such a great advantage in that? Often I have observed that it is the great misfortune for a man to have a wife who loves him. She creates the scenes of jealousy. She makes him look ridiculous. She insists on having all his time and attention. Ah, no. It is not the bed of roses. Poirot, I said, you're an incurable old cynic. Mais no. I only make the reflections. See you really, I am on the side of the good mamma. I could not refrain from laughing at hearing the haughty Duchess described in this way. Poirot remained quite serious. You should not laugh. It is of great importance, all this. I must reflect. I must reflect a great deal. I don't see what you can do in the matter, I said. Poirot paid no attention. You observed, Hastings, how well informed the Duchess was, and how vindictive. She knew all the evidence there was against Jane Wilkinson. The case for the prosecution, but not the case for the defense, I said, smiling. How did she come to know of it? Jane told the Duke. The Duke told her, I suggested. Yes, that is possible. Yet I have... My telephone rang sharply. I answered it. My part consisted of saying yes at varying intervals. Finally, I put down the receiver and turned excitedly to Poirot. That was Yop. Firstly, you're the goods, as usual. Secondly, he's had a cable from America. Thirdly, he's got the taxi driver. Fourthly, would you like to come round and hear what the taxi driver says? Fifthly, you're the goods again. And all along he's been convinced that you'd hit the nail on the head when you suggested that there was some man behind all this. I omitted to tell him that we'd just had a visitor who says the police force is corrupt." "So Yup is convinced at last," murmured Poirot. "Curious that the man in the background theory should be proved just at the moment when I was inclined to another possible theory." "What theory?" "The theory that the motive for the murder might have nothing to do with Lord Edgware himself. Imagine someone who hated Jane Wilkinson, hated her so much that they would even have had her hanged for murder. C'est une idée, ça?" He sighed, then roused himself. "Come, Hastings, let us hear what Yup has to say." End of chapter 19. Chapter 20. The Taxi Driver. We found Yup interrogating an old man with a ragged mustache and spectacles. He had a hoarse, self-pitying voice. "Ah, there you are," said Yup. "Well, things are all plain sailing, I think. This man, his name's Jobson, picked up 2 people in Longacre on the night of June 29th. "That's right," assented Jobson hoarsely. "Lovely night it were, moon and all. The young lady and gentleman were by the tube station and hailed me." "They were in evening dress?" "Yes, gent in white waistcoat, and the young lady all in white with birds embroidered on it. Come out of the Royal Opera, I guess." "What time was this?" "Some time afore 11. Well, what next?" "Told me to go to Regent Gate. They'd tell me which house when they got there, and told me to be quick, too. People always say that, as though you wanted to loiter. Sooner you get there and get another fare, the better for you. I never think of that. And mind you, if there's an accident, you'll get the blame for dangerous driving." "Cut it out," said Yup impatiently. "There wasn't an accident this time, was there?" "No," agreed the man, as though unwilling to abandon his claim to such an occurrence. "No, as a matter of fact, there weren't. Well, I got to Regent Gate. Not about 7 minutes it didn't take me. And there the gentleman rapped on the glass, and I stopped. About number 8, that were. Oh, the gentleman and lady got out. The gentleman stopped where he was and told me to do the same. The lady crossed the road and began walking back along the houses the other side. The gentleman stayed by the cab, standing on the sidewalk with his back to me, looking after her, had his hands in his pockets. It's about 5 minutes when I heard him say something, kind of exclamation under his breath, and then off he goes too. I look after him because I wasn't going to be bilked. It had been done before to me, so I kept my eye on him. He went up the steps of one of the houses on the other side and went in." "Did he push the door open?" "No, he had a latchkey." "What number was the house?" "It would be 17 or 19, I fancy. Well, it seemed odd to me, my being told to stay where I was, so I kept watching. About 5 minutes later, him and the young lady came out together. They got back into the cab and told me to drive back to Covent Garden Opera House. They stopped me just before I got there and paid me. Paid me handsome, I will say. Though I expect I've got into trouble over it. Seems there's nothing but trouble." "You're all right," said Yup. "Just run your eye over these, will you, and tell me if the young lady's among them." There were half a dozen photographs, all fairly alike as to type. I looked with some interest over his shoulder. "That were her," said Jobson. He pointed a decisive finger at one of Geraldine Marsh in evening dress. "Sure?" "Quite sure. Pale she was, and dark." Now the man. Another sheaf of photographs was handed to him. He looked at them attentively and then shook his head. "Well, I couldn't say, not for sure. Either of these 2 might be him." The photographs included one of Ronald Marsh, but Jobson had not selected it. Instead, he indicated 2 other men, not unlike Marsh in type. Jobson then departed, and Yup flung the photographs on the table. "Good enough. Wish I could have got a clear identification of his lordship. Of course, it's an old photograph taken 7 or 8 years ago. The only one I could get hold of. Yes, I'd like a clear identification. Although the case is clear enough, bang a couple of alibis. Clever of you to think of it, Mr. Poirot. Poirot looked modest. When I found that she and her cousin were both at the opera, it seemed to me possible that they might have been together during one of the intervals. Naturally, the parties they were with would assume that they had not left the opera house. But a half-hour interval gives plenty of time to get to Regent Gate and back. The moment the Lord Edgware laid such stress upon his alibi, I was sure something was wrong with it. You're a nice, suspicious sort of fellow, aren't you? Said Yop affectionately. Well, you're about right. Can't be too suspicious in a world like this. His lordship is our man, all right. Look at this. He produced a paper. Cable from New York. They got into touch with Miss Lucy Adams. The letter was in the mail delivered to her this morning. She was not willing to give up the original unless absolutely necessary, but she willingly allowed the officer to take a copy of it and cable it to us. Here it is, and it's as damning as you could hope for. Poirot took the cable with great interest. I read it over his shoulder. Following is text letter to Lucy Adams, dated June 29th, 8 Rosedew Mansions, London. SW3 begins, Dearest little sister, I'm sorry I wrote such a scrappy bit last week, but things were rather busy and there was a lot to see to. Well, darling, it's been ever such a success. Notices splendid, box office good, and everybody most kind. I've got some real good friends over here, and next year I'm thinking of taking a theater for 2 months. The Russian dancer sketch went very well, and the American woman in Paris, too. But the scenes at a foreign hotel are still the favorites, I think. I'm so excited that I hardly know what I'm writing, and you'll see why in a minute. But first I must tell you what people have said. Mr. Hergesheimer was ever so kind, and he's going to ask me to lunch to meet Sir Montague Corner, who might do great things for me. The other night I met Jane Wilkinson, and she was ever so sweet about my show and my take-off of her, which brings me around to what I'm going to tell you. I don't really like her very much because I've been hearing a lot about her lately from someone I know, and she's behaved cruelly, I think, and in a very underhand way, but I won't go into that now. You know that she really is Lady Edgware? I've heard a lot about him too lately, and he's no beauty, I can tell you. He treated his nephew, the Captain Marsh I've mentioned to you, in the most shameful way, literally turned him out of the house and discontinued his allowance. He told me all about it, and I felt awfully sorry for him. He enjoyed my show very much. He said, I believe it would take in Lord Edgware himself. Look here, will you take something on for a bet? I laughed and said, how much? Lucy, darling, the answer fairly took my breath away. $10,000. $10,000. Think of it, just to help someone win a silly bet. Why, I said I'd play a joke on the king in Buckingham Palace and risk lèse-majesté for that. Well, then, we laid our heads together and got down to details. I'll tell you all about it next week, whether I'm spotted or not. But anyway, Lucy, darling, whether I succeed or fail, I'm to have the $10,000. Oh, Lucy, little sister, what's that going to mean to us? No time for more. Just going off to do my hoax. Lots and lots and lots of love, little sister mine. Yours, Carlotta. Poirot laid down the letter. It had touched him, I could see. Yop, however, reacted in quite a different way. We've got him, said Yop exultantly. Yes, said Poirot. His voice sounded strangely flat. Yop looked at him curiously. What is it, Monsieur Poirot? Nothing, said Poirot. It is not somehow just as I thought. That is all. He looked acutely unhappy. But still it must be so, he said as though to himself. Yes, it must be so. Of course it is so. Why, you said so all along. No, no, you misunderstand me. Didn't you say there was someone back of all this who got the girl into doing it innocently? Yes, yes. Well, what more do you want? Poirot sighed and said nothing. You are an odd sort of cove. Nothing ever satisfies you. I say it was a piece of luck the girl wrote this letter. Poirot agreed with more vigor than he had yet shown. Mais oui, that is what the murderer did not expect. When Miss Adams accepted that $10,000, she signed her death warrant. The murderer thought he had taken all the precautions, and yet, in sheer innocence, she outwitted him. The dead speak. Yes, sometimes the dead speak. I never thought she'd done it off her own bat, said Yop unblushingly. No, no, said Poirot absently. Well, I must get on with things. You are going to arrest Captain Marsh. Lord Edgware, I mean. Why not? The case against him seems proved up to the hilt. True. You seem very despondent about it, Monsieur Poirot. The truth is, you like things to be difficult. Here's your own theory proved, and even that does not satisfy you. Can you see any flaw in the evidence we've got? Poirot shook his head. Whether Miss Marsh was accessory or not, I don't know, said Yop. Seems as though she must have known about it, going there with him from the opera. If she wasn't, why did he take her? Well, we'll hear what they've both got to say. May I be present? Poirot spoke almost humbly. Certainly you can. I owe the idea to you. He picked up the telegram on the table. I drew Poirot aside. What is the matter, Poirot? I am very unhappy, Hastings. This seems the plain sailing and the above board, but there is something wrong. Somewhere or other, Hastings, there is a fact that escapes us. It all fits together. It is as I imagined it, and yet, my friend, there is something wrong. He looked at me piteously. I was at a loss what to say. End of chapter 20. Chapter 21. Ronald's story. I found it hard to understand Poirot's attitude. Surely this was what he had predicted all along. All the way to Regent Gate, he sat perplexed and frowning, paying no attention to Yop's self-congratulations. He came out of his reveries at last with a sigh. At all events, he murmured, we can see what he has to say. Next to nothing if he's wise, said Yop. There's any amount of men that have hanged themselves by being too eager to make a statement. Well, no one can say as we don't warn them. It's all fair and above board, and the more guilty they are, the more anxious they are to pipe up and tell you the lies they've thought out to meet the case. They don't know that you should always submit your lies to a solicitor first. He laughed and said, Solicitors and coroners are the worst enemies of the police. Again and again I've had a perfectly clear case messed up by the coroner fooling about and letting the guilty party get away with it. Lawyers you can't object to so much, I suppose. They're paid for their artfulness in twisting things this way and that. On arrival at Regent Gate, we found that our quarry was at home. The family were still at the luncheon table. Yop preferred a request to speak to Lord Edgware privately. We were shown into the library. In a minute or two, the young man came to us. There was an easy smile on his face, which changed a little as he cast a quick glance over us. His lips tightened. Hello, Inspector, he said. What's all this about? Yop said his little piece in the classic fashion. So that's it, is it? Said Ronald. He drew a chair towards him and sat down. He pulled out a cigarette case. I think, Inspector, I'd like to make a statement. That's as you please, my lord. Meaning that it's damned foolish on my part. All the same, I think I will, having no reason to fear the truth, as the heroes in books always say. Yop said nothing. His face remained expressionless. There's a nice handy table and chair, went on the young man. Your minion can sit down and take it all down in shorthand. I don't think that Yop was used to having his arrangements made for him so thoughtfully. Lord Edgware's suggestion was adopted. To begin with, said the young man, having some grains of intelligence, I strongly suspect that my beautiful alibi has bust. Gone up in smoke. Exit the youthful Dortheimers. Taxi driver, I suppose? We know all about your movements on that night, said Yop woodenly. I have the greatest admiration for Scotland Yard. All the same, you know, if I had really been planning a deed of violence, I shouldn't have hired a taxi and driven straight to the place and kept the fellow waiting. Have you thought of that? Ah, I see Monsieur Poirot has. It had occurred to me, Yes, said Poirot. Such is not the matter of a premeditated crime, said Ronald. Put on a red mustache and horn-rimmed glasses and drive to the next street and pay the man off. Take the tube. Well, I won't go into it all. My counsel, at a fee of several thousand guineas, will do it better than I can. Of course, I see the answer. Crime was a sudden impulse. There was I, waiting in the cab, etc., etc. It occurs to me, now, my boy, up and doing. Well, I'm going to tell you the truth. I was in a hole for money. That's been pretty clear, I think. It was rather a desperate business. I had to get it by the next day or drop out of things. I tried my uncle. He'd no love for me, but I thought he might care for the honor of his name. Middle-aged men sometimes do. My uncle proved to be lamentably modern in his cynical indifference. Well, it looked just like having to grin and bear it. I was going to try and have a shot at borrowing from Dortheimer, but I knew there wasn't a hope. And marry his daughter I couldn't. She's much too sensible a girl to take me anyway. Then by chance I met my cousin at the opera. I don't often come across her, but she was always a decent kid when I lived in the house. I found myself telling her all about it. She'd heard something from her father anyway. Then she showed her mettle. She suggested I should take her pearls. They belonged to her mother. He paused. There was something like real emotion, I think, in his voice, or else he suggested it better than I could have believed possible. Well, I accepted the blessed child's offer. I could raise the money I wanted on them, and I swore I'd turn to and redeem them even if it meant working to manage it. But the pearls were at home in Regent Gate. We decided that the best thing to do would be to go and fetch them at once. We jumped in a taxi, and off we went. We made the fellow stop on the opposite side of the street in case anyone should hear the taxi draw up at the door. Geraldine got out and went across the road. She had her latchkey with her. She would go in quietly, get the pearls, and bring them out to me. She didn't expect to meet anyone except possibly a servant. Miss Carroll, my uncle's secretary, usually went to bed at 9:30. He himself would probably be in the library. So off Dino went. I stood on the pavement smoking a cigarette. Every now and then I looked over towards the house to see if she was coming. And now I come to the part of the story that you may believe or not, as you like. A man passed me on the sidewalk. I turned to look after him. To my surprise, he went up the steps and let himself into number 17. At least I thought it was number 17, but of course I was some distance away. That surprised me very much for two reasons. One was that the man had let himself in with a key, and the second was that I thought I recognized him, a certain well-known actor. I was so surprised that I determined to look into matters. I happened to have my own key of number 17 in my pocket. I had lost it, or thought I'd lost it 3 years ago, had come across it unexpectedly a day or two ago, and had been meaning to give it back to my uncle this morning. However, in the heat of our discussion, it had slipped my memory. I had transferred it with the other contents of my pockets when I changed. Telling the taxi-man to wait, I strode hurriedly along the pavement, crossed the road, went up the steps of number 17, and opened the door with my key. The hall was empty. There was no sign of any visitor, having just entered. I stood for a minute looking about me. Then I went towards the library door. Perhaps the man was in with my uncle. If so, I should hear the murmur of voices. I stood outside the library door, but I heard nothing. I suddenly felt I had made the most abject fool of myself. Of course, the man must have gone into some other house. The house beyond, probably. Regent Gate is rather dimly lighted at night. I felt an absolute idiot. What on earth had possessed me to follow the fellow, I could not think. It had landed me here, and a pretty fool I should look if my uncle were to come suddenly out of the library and find me. I should get Geraldine into trouble, and altogether the fat would be in the fire. All because something in the man's manner had made me imagine that he was doing something that he didn't want known. Luckily no one caught me. I must get out of it as soon as I could. I tiptoed back towards the front door, and at the same moment Geraldine came down the stairs with the pearls in her hand. She was very startled at seeing me, of course. I got her out of the house, and then explained. He paused. We hurried back to the opera, got there just as the curtain was going up. No one suspected that we'd left it. It was a hot night, and several people went outside to get a breath of air. He paused. I know what you'll say. Why didn't I tell you this right away? And now I put it to you. Would you, with a motive for murder sticking out a yard, admit light-heartedly that you'd actually been at the place the murder was committed on the night in question? Frankly, I funked it. Even if we were believed, it was going to be a lot of worry for me and for Geraldine. We'd had nothing to do with the murder. We'd seen nothing. We'd heard nothing. Obviously, I thought Aunt Jane had done it. Well, why bring myself in? I told you about the quarrel and my lack of money because I knew you'd ferret it out, and if I'd tried to conceal all that, you'd be much more suspicious, and you'd probably examine that alibi much more closely. As it was, I thought that if I bucked enough about it, it would almost hypnotize you into thinking it all right. The Dortheimers were, I knew, honestly convinced that I had been at Covent Garden all the time, that I spent one interval with my cousin wouldn't strike them as suspicious, and she could always say she'd been with me there and that we hadn't left the place. Miss Marsh agreed to this concealment? Yes. As soon as I got the news, I got onto her and cautioned her for her life not to say anything about her excursion here that night. She'd been with me, and I'd been with her during the last interval at Covent Garden. We'd walked in the street a little, that was all. She understood, and she quite agreed. He paused. I know it looks bad, coming out with this afterwards, but the story's true enough. I can give you the name and address of the man who let me have the cash on Geraldine's pearls next morning, and if you ask her, she'll confirm every word I've told you. He sat back in his chair and looked at Yop. Yop continued to look expressionless. You say you thought Jane Wilkinson had committed the murder, Lord Edgware, he said. Well, wouldn't you have thought so, after the butler story? What about your wager with Miss Adams? Wager with Miss Adams? With Carlotta Adams, do you mean? What has she got to do with it? Do you deny that you offered her the sum of $10,000 to impersonate Miss Jane Wilkinson at the house that night? Ronald stared. Offered her $10,000? Nonsense. Someone's been pulling your leg. I haven't got $10,000 to offer. You've got a hold of a mare's nest. Does she say so? Oh, dash it all, I forgot. She's dead, isn't she? Yes, Poirot said quietly. She is dead. Ronald turned his eyes from one to the other of us. He had been debonair before. Now his face had whitened. His eyes looked frightened. I don't understand all this, he said. It's true what I told you. I suppose you don't believe me, any of you. And then, to my amazement, Poirot stepped forward. Yes, he said. I believe you. End of chapter 21. Chapter 22. Strange Behavior of Hercule Poirot. We were in our rooms. What on earth? I began. Poirot stopped me with a gesture more extravagant than any gesture I had ever seen him make. Both arms whirled in the air. I implore of you, Hastings, not now, not now. And upon that he seized his hat, clapped it on his head as though he had never heard of order and method, and rushed headlong from the room. He had not returned when, about an hour later, Yop appeared. Little man gone out? He inquired. I nodded. Yop sank into a seat. He dabbed his forehead with a handkerchief. The day was warm. What the devil took him? He inquired. I can tell you, Captain Hastings, you could have knocked me down with a feather when he stepped up to the main and said, I believe you, for all the world as though he were acting in a romantic melodrama. It beats me. It beat me also, and I said so. And then he marches out of the house, said Yop. What did he say about it to you? Nothing, I replied. Nothing at all? Absolutely nothing. When I was going to speak to him, he waved me aside. I thought it best to leave him alone. When we got back here, I started to question him. He waved his arms, seized his hat, and rushed out again. We looked at each other. Yop tapped his forehead significantly. Must be, he said. For once I was disposed to agree. Yop had often suggested before that Poirot was what he called touched. In those cases he had simply not understood what Poirot was driving at. Here I was forced to confess I could not understand Poirot's attitude. If not touched, he was, at any rate, suspiciously changeable. Here was his own private theory triumphantly confirmed, and straightway he went back on it. It was enough to dismay and distress his warmest supporters. I shook my head in a discouraged fashion. He's always been what I call peculiar, said Yop. Got his own particular angle of looking at things, and a very queer one it is. He's a kind of genius, I admit that. But they always say that geniuses are very near the borderline and liable to slip over any minute. He's always been fond of having things difficult. A straightforward case is never good enough for him. No, it's got to be torturous. He's got away from real life. He plays a game of his own. It's like an old lady playing at patience. If it doesn't come out, she cheats. Well, it's the other way around with him. If it's coming out too easily, he cheats to make it more difficult. That's the way I look at it. I found it difficult to answer him. I was too perturbed and distressed to be able to think clearly. I also found Poirot's behavior unaccountable, and since I was very attached to my strange little friend, it worried me more than I cared to express. In the middle of a gloomy silence, Poirot walked into the room. He was, I was thankful to see, quite calm now. Very carefully he removed his hat, placed it with his stick on the table, and sat down in his accustomed chair. "So you are here, my good Yap. I am glad. It was on my mind that I must see you as soon as possible." Yap looked at him without replying. He saw that this was only the beginning. He waited for Poirot to explain himself. This my friend did, speaking slowly and carefully. "Écoutez, Yap. We are wrong. We are all wrong. It is grievous to admit it, but we have made a mistake." "That's all right," said Yap confidently. "But it is not all right. It is deplorable. It grieves me to the heart." "You needn't be grieved about that, young man. He richly deserves all he gets." "It is not he I am grieving about. It is you." "Me? You needn't worry about me." "But I do. See you, who was it set you on this course? It was Hercule Poirot. Mais oui, I set you on the trail. I direct your attention to Carlotta Adams. I mentioned to you the matter of the letter to America. Every step of the way it is I who point it." "I was bound to get there anyway," said Yap coldly. "You got a bit ahead of me, that's all." "Cela c'est beau. But it does not console me. If harm, if loss of prestige comes to you through listening to my little ideas, I shall blame myself bitterly." Yap merely looked amused. I think he credited Poirot with motives that were none too pure. He fancied that Poirot grudged him the credit resulting from the successful elucidation of the affair. "That's all right," he said. "I shan't forget to let it be known that I owe something to you over this business." He winked at me. "Oh, it is not that at all." Poirot clicked his tongue with impatience. "I want no credit. And what is more, I tell you there will be no credit. It is a fiasco that you prepare for yourself, and I, Hercule Poirot, am the cause." Suddenly, at Poirot's expression of extreme melancholy, Yop shouted with laughter. Poirot looked affronted. "Sorry, Monsieur Poirot," he wiped his eyes, "but you did look for all the world like a dying duck in a thunderstorm. Now look here, let's forget all this. I'm willing to shoulder the credit or the blame of this affair. It will make a big noise. You're right there. Well, I'm going all out to get a conviction. It may be that a clever counsel will get his lordship off. You never know with a jury. But even so, it won't do me any harm. It will be known that we caught the right man even if we couldn't get a conviction. And if, by any chance, the third housemaid has hysterics and owns up she did it, well, I'll take my medicine and I won't complain you led me up the garden. That's fair enough." Poirot gazed at him mildly and sadly. "You have the confidence. Always the confidence. You never stop and say to yourself, 'Can it be so?' You never doubt or wonder. You never think, 'This is too easy.'" "You bet your life I don't. And that's just where, if you'll excuse me saying so, you go off the rails every time. Why shouldn't a thing be easy? What's the harm in a thing being easy?" Poirot looked at him, sighed, half threw up his arms, then shook his head. "C'est fin. I will say no more." "Splendid," said Yap heartily. "Now let's get down to brass tacks. You'd like to hear what I've been doing?" "Assuredly." "Well, I saw the Honorable Geraldine, and her story tallied exactly with his lordship's. They may both be in it together, but I think not. It's my opinion he bluffed her. She's 3 parts sweet on him anyway. Took on terribly when she found he was arrested." "Did she now? And the secretary, Miss Carroll?" "Wasn't too surprised, I fancy." However, that's only my idea. What about the pearls? I asked. Wasn't that part of the story true? Absolutely. He raised the money on them early the following morning, but I don't think that touches the main argument. As I see it, the plan came into his head when he came across his cousin at the opera. It came to him in a flash. He was desperate. Here was a way out. I fancy he had been meditating something of the kind. That's why he had the key with him. I don't believe that story of suddenly coming across it. Well, as he talks to his cousin, he sees that by involving her he gains additional security for himself. He plays on her feelings, hints at the pearls, she plays up, and off they go. As soon as she's in the house, he follows her in and goes along to the library. Maybe his lordship had dozed off in his chair. Anyway, in 2 seconds he's done the trick and he's out again. I don't fancy he meant the girl to catch him in the house. He counted on being found pacing up and down near the taxi, and I don't think the taximan was meant to see him go in. The impression was to be that he was walking up and down smoking whilst he waited for the girl. The taxi was facing the opposite direction, remember. Of course, the next morning he has to pledge the pearls. He must still seem to be in need of money. Then, when he hears of the crime, he frightens the girl into concealing their visit to the house. They will say that they spent the interval together at the opera house. "Then why did they not do so?" asked Poirot sharply. Yop shrugged his shoulders. Changed his mind, or judged that she wouldn't be able to go through with it. She's a nervous type. "Yes," said Poirot meditatively. "She is a nervous type." After a minute or two, he said, "It does not strike you that it would have been easier and simpler for Captain Marsh to have left the opera during the interval by himself, to have gone in quietly with his key, killed his uncle, and returned to the opera, instead of having a taxi outside, and a nervous girl coming down the stairs any minute who might lose her head and give him away?" Yop grinned. "That's what you and I would have done. But then we're a shade brighter than Captain Ronald Marsh." "I am not so sure. He strikes me as intelligent." "But not so intelligent as Monsieur Hercule Poirot. Come now, I'm sure of that." Yop laughed. Poirot looked at him coldly. "If he isn't guilty, why did he persuade the Adams girl to take on that stunt?" went on Yop. "There can be only one reason for that stunt, to protect the real criminal." "There I am of accord with you absolutely." "Well, I'm glad we agree about something." "It might be he who actually spoke to Miss Adams," mused Poirot. "Was really—" "No, that is an imbecility." Then, looking suddenly at Yop, he rapped out a quick question. "What is your theory as to her death?" Yop cleared his throat. "I'm inclined to believe accident. A convenient accident, I admit. I can't see that it could have had anything to do with it. His alibi is straight enough after the opera. He was at Sobrani's with the Dortimers till after 1 o'clock. Long before that, she was in bed and asleep. No, I think that was an instance of the infernal luck criminals sometimes have. Otherwise, if that accident hadn't happened, I think he had his plans for dealing with her. First, he'd put the fear of the Lord into her, tell her she'd be arrested for murder if she confessed the truth, and then he'd squeeze her with a fresh lot of money." "Does it strike you?" Poirot stared straight in front of him. "Does it strike you that Miss Adams would let another woman be hanged when she herself held evidence that would acquit her?" "Jane Wilkinson wouldn't have been hanged. The Montague corner party evidence was too strong for that." "But the murderer did not know that. He would have had to count on Jane Wilkinson being hanged, and Carlotta Adams keeping silence." "You love talking, don't you, Monsieur Poirot? And you're positively convinced now that Ronald Marsh is a white-headed boy who can do no wrong. Do you believe that story of his about seeing a man sneak surreptitiously into the house?" Poirot shrugged his shoulders. "Do you know who he says he thought it was?" "I could guess, perhaps." "He says he thought it was the film star, Brian Martin. What do you think of that? A man who'd never even met Lord Edgware." "Then it would certainly be curious if one such a man entering that house with a key." "Yeah," said Yop, a rich noise expressive of contempt. "And now I suppose it will surprise you to hear that Mr. Brian Martin wasn't in London that night. He took a young lady to dine down at Molesey. They didn't get back to London till midnight." "Ah," said Poirot mildly. "No, I am not surprised. Was the young lady also a member of the profession?" "No. Girl who keeps a hat shop. As a matter of fact, it was Miss Adams's friend, Miss Driver. I think you'll agree her testimony is past suspicion." "I am not disputing it, my friend." "In fact, you're done down, and you know it, old boy," said Yop, laughing. "Cock and bull story trumped up on the moment, that's what it was. Nobody entered number 17, and nobody entered either of the houses either side. So what does that show? That his lordship's a liar." Poirot shook his head sadly. Yop rose to his feet, his spirits restored. "Come now, we're right, you know." "Who was D. Paris? November?" Yop shrugged his shoulders. "Ancient history, I imagine. Can't a girl have a souvenir 6 months ago without its having something to do with this crime? We must have a sense of proportion." "6 months ago," murmured Poirot, a sudden light in his eyes. "Dieu, que Jésus bête." "What's he saying?" inquired Yop of me. "Listen." Poirot rose and tapped Yop on the chest. "Why does Miss Adams' maid not recognize that box? Why does Miss Driver not recognize it?" "What do you mean?" "Because the box was new. It had only just been given to her. Paris, November. That is all very well. Doubtless that is the date of which the box is to be a souvenir. But it was given to her now, not then. It has just been bought. Only just been bought. Investigate that, I implore you, my good Yap. It is a chance, decidedly a chance. It was brought not here, but abroad, probably Paris. If it had been bought here, some jeweler would have come forward. If it has been photographed and described in the papers. Yes, yes, Paris. Possibly some other foreign town, but I think Paris. Find out, I implore you. Make the inquiries. I so badly want to know who is this mysterious D." "It will do no harm," said Yop good-naturedly. "Can't say I'm very excited about it myself, but I'll do what I can. The more we know, the better." Nodding cheerfully to us, he departed. End of chapter 22.